In this section, we'll be dealing with rates. What are the two formulas for rate? Rate is a measure of how quickly something is done, and on the test you will have to know the following two formulas. The first one is rate equals distance divided by time, i.e. miles per hour, and the second one is that rate equals work divided by time, i.e. words typed per minute. For example, suppose that Mark travels 420 miles in 7 hours. What is his rate? Well, if he went 420 miles and it took him 7 hours, and we know that rate is equal to distance divided by time, all we do is divide 420 miles by 7 hours, which comes out to 60 miles per hour. So the rate, or Mark's rate, is 60 miles per hour. Or suppose that Mary owns a bike shop, and on average she can repair 15 bicycles in 3 days. What is the rate at which she fixes bikes? Well, we know that she fixes 15 bikes and it takes her 3 days to do so, and we know that rate is equal to work divided by time, which is 15 bikes in 3 days. This reduces to 5 bikes in 1 day, so Mary's rate is 5 bikes in 1 day. Let's take a look at some questions. So if George drives his car at a constant rate of 65 miles per hour, in how many hours will he have gone 520 miles? Most rate questions on the test require for you to make a proportion, where distance 1 divided by time 1 is equal to distance 2 divided by time 2. Or in other words, you have to set two rates equal to one another. Basically what you need to do is you need to say, well, if George can drive 65 miles in 1 hour, then he can drive 520 miles in how many hours? Or 65 miles in 1 hour is equal to 520 miles in how many hours? So this is a proportion, just like we did in the previous section, where you have to make sure that the units are the same, miles per hour, miles per hour. So if there's miles in the numerator here, there should be miles in the numerator here. And if there's hours in the denominator here, there should be hours in the denominator here. We can then turn this into an algebraic equation where 65 over 1 is equal to 520 over x. And once you do the algebra, you get that x equals 8. So if George drives his car at a constant rate of 65 miles per hour, it'll take him 8 hours to go 520 miles. Let's try it again. So if Jake drove a distance of 210 miles in 3 hours, how many miles would he cover if he traveled for 5 hours at the same rate? Well, we set up a proportion. If you can do 210 miles in 3 hours, that's how many miles in 5 hours? The algebraic equation then is 210 over 3 is equal to x over 5, and once you solve the algebra, you get that x is equal to 350. So, if Jake drove a distance of 210 miles in 3 hours, he would travel 350 miles if he traveled for 5 hours at the same rate. Now, there's another way to do these questions that's a bit more intuitive, and you can use a mnemonic device that I like to call the distance bar. So if George drives his car at a constant rate of 65 miles per hour, in how many hours will he have gone 520 miles? Well, we know that George drove 520 miles. So what you do is you write a distance bar. Whenever you have a question involving distance, draw a distance bar and write the distance on top. Then write the rate on the bottom. Since we know that he drove 65 miles per hour, put the rate down here. What we don't know is the time. When you have a distance bar and you put the distance on top and the rate and the time on the bottom, this is a mnemonic device to help you remember that the distance divided by the rate is equal to the time. So 520 divided by 65 should give us the time, and vice versa. You can divide the distance by the time to get the rate. So since we're being asked here for the time, we're going to divide 520 by 65 to get 520 over 65, or 104 over 13 when you reduce, or 8 when you do the division. So it turns out that it takes 8 hours, just as we got in the previous, using the previous method. So if George drove his car at a constant rate of 65 miles per hour, it would have taken him 8 hours to go 520 miles. Let's try it one more time. So how long does it take to travel 900 miles at 120 miles per hour? So you draw the distance bar, you put the distance up top. You don't need to draw the car if you don't want to. You put the distance up top, you put the rate in this case, which is what we know on the bottom, and we're being asked to find the time. It's good to symbolize the time with a variable or to write time equals question mark, just to remind yourself that you're looking for time, the time it took to go on this trip. And then we divide. 900 divided by 120 is equal to 45 over 6 when we factor out 20 from both the top and the bottom. And that's equal to 7.5. So it would have taken 7.5 hours or 7.5 hours to travel 900 miles at 120 miles per hour. So the answer here is 7.5. Let's take a look at this question. Pat started cleaning her attic at 4 p.m. and was 2/3 done by 8 p.m. Assuming that she is working at a constant rate, when will Pat finish cleaning her attic? Well, we know that Pat did 2/3 of the work in 4 hours. So what we want to know is how long is it going to take the rest of the work? So the rest of the work in how many hours? If you do 2/3 of the work, that means you have 1/3 of the work left to do. And we can put x for the how many hours. So what we get is 2 over 3 over 4 is equal to 1/3 over x. We would then turn both of these into fractions, cross multiply to get 2/3 times 1/4 is equal to 1/3 times 1 over x. 2 over 12 is equal to 1/3 times 1 over x. The two 12s can be reduced to 1/6, and then the x is equal to 2 because 1/3 times 1/2 gives you 1/6. So it's going to take 2 more hours. If she started at 8 p.m., another 2 hours is going to be 10 p.m. Therefore, the answer is 10 p.m. Let's take a look at this question. How many minutes does it take to travel 100 miles at 120 miles per hour? Well, we can set up a proportion. 120 miles in 1 hour is the same as 100 miles in how many minutes? However, notice that here on the left we have an hour. That's the unit of time, where on the right it's minutes. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that both units of time are the same. When you set up a proportion, the units need to be the same. So we need to say if you can do 120 miles in 60 minutes, then you can do 100 miles in how many minutes? Here, both units are the same. So we set up a proportion algebraically. 120 over 60 is equal to 100 over x. 120 divided by 60 is equal to 100 over x. We can cross multiply that. We get 120 times x is equal to 60 times 100. And then when you divide both sides by 120, you get that x is equal to 60 times 100 over 120. Once we cancel out what we can cancel out, we get that x is equal to 50. So it takes 50 minutes to travel 100 miles if you're going 120 miles per hour.